You're listening to the Build, Buy, Sell Agency Podcast, and this episode is part of our Agency Leader Series. My name is Shane Perkins, and I'm best known for leading acquisitions, deal making, and financing for Unite Digital, a unique and growing agency network specifically positioned to serve mid-market clients across the U.S. And I'm talking to mid-size agency owners across the marketing and advertising spectrum to uncover their top mind shifts, lessons learned, and insights that help them grow and manage their agency, as well as give you a chance to learn what partner and deal opportunities they are looking for right now that you can reach out about to explore possibilities to work together. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the Build, Buy, Sell Agency Podcast. This is your host, Shane Perkins, and I'm here today with JC Cedeno, who is the CEO at Palm Era, a full-service agency based in Miami, Florida, and offices throughout Latin America. So they serve the US, Caribbean, and all Latin America. Hey, JC, great to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
JC, so how long has your agency been running? And I'd love to hear the top mind shift that you've had so far from running your agency.
We've been serving clients in the US and Latin America since the last 4 years. We like to think that we've been very successful for an agency of our age, and most of our clients are US-based international companies. And we serve them in different verticals and different markets, depending on their needs. Because of success, I think has been rapid. And like many other companies, we have some hiccups in the road, bumps in the road, but for the most part has been good. I think there is a tendency, at least for me, to think that I may be the smarter person in the room, right? So one thing that I learned very quickly is, number one, that I am not. And I would suggest that if you have a team that is qualified, people that are smart, that are go-getters, that are empowered and energized, I highly recommend listening to them. That's at least what I try to do.
How do you go about doing that? Putting your ego aside and letting them run, helping run the show?
I'll say one is that you have to be committed to doing it. And the second one, we've learned to rely on data. So people have a lot of personal opinions. That does include myself. But at the end of the day, there is a market. I think we live in an era where data and data availability is perhaps one of the highest ever. And we try to use data to make decisions. And if the data supports the decision, then go ahead and implement it.
So it sounds like so no matter who has the feedback, you say, if you can support it by data, we can consider it as an opportunity.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, got it. Tell me a little bit about the size of Palm Era and the scope of what you guys deal with.
We're an interesting agency, I think. We decided that our setup as an agency is probably closer aligned to corporations. So we create functional areas, and within those functional areas, we have an expert. It goes from CRM, demand generation on the B2B space, to as diverse as branded content and mini-series that we do for some of our clients. In total, we are a little bit over 80 people.
Okay.
Headquarters in Miami. And then our second largest office will be Mexico and Colombia.
I've always been curious about that in terms of having I don't know if you call it offshoring from a U.S. perspective, but I've always been curious about the advantages of focusing on doing business or transitioning to doing business in the U.S. or focusing on it, but having a team that's based outside of the U.S. I'm curious on what advantages do you think you have there?
There are a couple, and it depends on the client and the market. But the most obvious would be pricing. Even though, and for some of your audience that are listening to the podcast, it may be the same, but even though we try not to compete on pricing, we've seen it in the last 18 months. Budgets are getting tighter. Business cases are getting tougher and tougher. And if we can prove or show that there will be a high return on investment for our clients and prospects, then we are in the game. So one of the advantages is using people that, from a cost perspective, will be more efficient than in the United States. But the drawback to that is that the culture and the know-how is not always the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's perhaps our biggest challenge. You're in Latin America, we pay them higher than the local market for sure. But then they need to know, and we know that we're serving US-based clients, and we need to deliver accordingly.
I'd like to go back into the mind shift real quick. One you had noted was build a team that can challenge you. So as a leader, I would imagine you're constantly challenging them. But how do you create a team or an organization that they can have to challenge you? And what are some of the steps that an agency owner can take to maybe make that into a process?
There has to be, or at least what I do, there has to be an openness to allow them to speak their mind, even if they're not right. So sometimes we have, one of the things that we try to do religiously is we have meetings just with the directors. They may last up to 3 hours. We do them every week. And I allow them to express their thoughts, no retaliation. I allow them to say something, speak with candor. If they feel there is an opportunity for improvement, just say it. Mm-hmm. You don't even have to be politically correct, as long as there's no personal attacks. But other than that, everything goes. They also need to be able to receive feedback from me and other team members in the same way. And after everything is said and done, we go back to data. What does the data say? Then, besides the challenging, I think the most important component right after that is the actual implementation. And we know, I expect some things to work. Others will not work within the organization. Ideas that we have for projects or clients, or even for the culture, which is where I spend a lot of my time. When that is the case, you know what? Nothing happened. Flip the page, readjust, re-implement, and keep on measuring.
So let's go back to that 3-hour session. That, I would imagine not a lot of agency owners are taking the time to do that because they're just so busy. So what, how is that structured?
Well, number one, we start at 7 a.m.
Okay.
So, I mean, we want to minimize the time that it takes from running the business. But it is our time. It is where we come together, where we pitch the ideas, when we tell them, we make sure it doesn't become a status.
Okay.
We're talking about next steps. I try to, in many cases, there's a tendency where I have the mic and I'm leading the conversation. Those are less successful than when they run the show. Mm-hmm. So our contact guy gets there and he says, hey, I'm seeing opportunities in the marketplace, not only in content, but also on technology, which is another of our verticals, and we try to incorporate. And now he's challenging the tech guy. So for instance, we do a lot of work within the B2B space. We know virtual reality is something that is being used for educational purposes and promotional purposes, especially if they're tech-related products. Easier to explain, much more engaging, and it has the look and feel of higher tech. So in these cases, a lot of those challenges and pushback are coming from other functional areas, not from me necessarily. And then we make decisions. And finally, internally, we make a decision on when is it going to be implemented. And if there's anything that we talk about status related during those meetings is that you told us this was going to be in a month. How is it coming along?
So in terms of people, like how many people do you have, and is it done via video or just everybody around the table?
We're 8. Some of them is if they're within the same office, it'd be on site. But other than that, is everything on video. We like to think as an agency, especially now with the millennial move, right? And how to retain the workforce. And I see many agencies. I see a lot of our clients justifying some of the millennial behavior. Work remotely, make it fun, the flexible hours. Interestingly enough, we're going exactly the opposite way. For us, the number of hours that you work at the office is important. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of our ideas come through collaboration. Whether you are on time or not on a call is taken very seriously because we know that is a culture pattern that will trickle down to when you have to deliver now ideas or implement it on time for our clients. I think it was Leo Burnett. Don't quote me on this one, but I think it's the one that said, you win clients with ideas and you lose them with service. For us, there is a strong commitment on when we say that we're going to do something, that we actually do it the way that we said it, with the quality that we say we're going to do it, and on time.
Let's take a transition. I'm curious, what did you originally design your agency to become, and how has it evolved in this short period of time?
First, I mean, we designed the agency based on what we were seeing was happening in the market. And this may not be true for all marketing professionals, but the ones that we were working with at that point was certainly a need. Most people would tell you, I have less time that I wish I did. I have more projects that I can handle, and I have less resources that I would love to have. So we said, if at the end of the day, we could summarize what our clients are looking for, what would it be? And we came out with something that is part of our positioning, which is effective marketing done simply or made simple. So that means normally I think if a head of marketing had an opportunity to deal with 4 different agencies, trade, branding, digital, you name it, content related, and they could deal with one, in most cases, they will deal with one. Additionally, I think most marketers tend to think about channel marketing. So they say, what is our strategy for social, for content, for tech, at the point of sale? How do we engage them? But in reality, the consumer doesn't think like us. For them, it's a seamless communication, depending on where you touch them in the consumer journey. So we decided that there was an opportunity in which we could be full service from A to Z, from the strategy and conceptualization of ideas to the actual implementation, not only across the functional areas, but also across the region. So if a client, which is several hours, they said, hey, we have business in the US, but Latin America is also a market with proximity where there are profits and we also need to serve it. And in most cases, the strategy and the guidelines of implementations are going to be based in the US, then we come in and we have the ability to execute. That hasn't changed. It's the same. So far, it is working. What has changed, though, is how we went about it. And still, I mean, sometimes I say, great, we're going to allocate more resources to X office on this functional area, just to find out a couple of weeks later that the market is changing, and probably that wouldn't be the best idea, that it may be better to have it in the US than in Latin America. So how we go about it is changing, and I think it will continue to change. But as of today, in 4 years of existence, the agency model and what represents has not really changed, or is not changing.
What do you see for the future for you guys and with your attempt to expand further into the US?
In the US, it would be for us to decide if we need to start developing very, very niche solutions. Being a full agency, a full service agency, there is always a question in which people say, well, are you really an expert in what you do? Within organizational setup, I think I mentioned this earlier, we look more like a corporation than we do an agency. And we do that on purpose, and it's to be able to develop people with expertise within functional areas. So our content guy, he is an expert at that, and our CRM B2B person is an expert at that. When we go and market, so far it's been okay, but I'm asking the question, should we split them? And if that is the case, do we lose the current value proposition or not? Like I said, probably the mentality of I am not the smarter person in the room, and so far each of the team members, they have their own opinions, but in the meantime we keep pushing forward and getting the pulse for the market.
So you guys are 4 years into it, a lot of good growth, wanting to expand into the US. What are some of the top lessons learned that you've had thus far? And this isn't your first career. You've had a lot of experience prior. So it sounds like what you've been able to do was take the experience in the corporate world, which you're in, into this, which it helped you kind of determine the structure of it, right? So where did you come from before the agency, and what are the top lessons learned that you think other agency owners should really take a listen to?
I like to say in my prior life, I was in finance. And I tell people that in finance, you only look at two colors, red and black. We definitely don't want to be in the red. But I was fortunate that during my finance career, I was working in media and entertainment. So I worked for HBO, I worked for Sony Pictures, and I actually got into TV working for a joint venture by Fox, Universal, Paramount, and MGM. So I think, even though it was finance, it's a lot closer to sales and marketing. Eventually, I decided to do an MBA, and that was while I was living in Atlanta. And I decided for that it would be marketing strategy and complement the finance function. From there, fast forward, I became an entrepreneur, and I thought an agency was the best way to fulfill the dream. Well, I would say recommendations that I would give fellow agency owners. The financial background has been a sort of a wonder in disguise. I do believe that marketing is becoming much more data-driven. Creative is important, probably as important as ever. But before, I would say the last 5 years, truly and really, the ability to measure what's working and not working, and first data available in the market, it is just unbelievable. And I do think a lot of agencies they're not set up to have the ability to analyze data. And in fact, I would say planning and research within agencies tend to be some of the most expensive resources. And if you're a mid-sized agency, allocating the money and the resources to build a strong data team is not easy.
So with you having the financial background, what could you tell some of the more creative or just marketing focused CEOs or leaders out there to implement or consider on the financial side that has helped you keep your agency more organized?
If you're talking to clients and prospects, all of them need to build business cases. So, think like they do. I mean, eventually they're going to go to their bosses, either the CMO or the president of the company, and they're going to say, "Hey, give me all these resources. I'm going to provide these results." Finance is becoming more involved in those decisions, and it's driven by return on investment. I would say keep that in mind. That's number one. Then I say we are, and for them it may be more obvious, we are in the people business. So normally our concentration is those that whom we serve. Is the CMO, it's the director of marketing. We want to make sure that we're treating them okay, and you build a strong relationship that they can rely on you. But then, I will advise that same principle applies to the people within the organization. So turn inwards and understand that at the end of the day, our business, unless you develop a product, is what we're selling is people, their ideas, their drive, their willingness to serve. And they need to feel that they are as important as the client.
You sent me a note about building that culture and creating incentives inside. How do you tie them with your ultimate goal? And what is that ultimate goal that you're trying to set?
The ultimate goal is to sell the agency by 2025.
Got it. Hey, we all got to have some type of exit, right?
Hey, here's the finance guy talking now.
Yeah.
So I'm very clear within the organization, very clear. They know the date. They know the valuation that we aspire. I've realized that some people really do not care. I mean, some people are not driven by stock options.
You mean your employees?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Other people are very much driven by that and the vision. And they ask questions. If we sell, how does it happen? What are the multiples? Would I have a job? So many of them, I allow them to ask questions. It doesn't matter which level of the organization. Some of them, some of the questions I've gotten is, "Oh, if we get acquired, would I have a job?" So yes, you will have a job, and if you are in the director management, probably you cannot leave the agency if you think you're gonna sell and bye, I'm out. Most of those deals will retain you at least for 3 years.
Well, Jesse, I have a question on that. Coming from the acquisition side, even though the acquirers say, we're not gonna lay off people when we buy this agency, that they're probably gonna cut out the people that are not performing. Just curious on how you handle that scenario.
Well, I'm going to pick on something that you just said. You should always fire non-performing people. It doesn't matter if it is, during, after, before acquisition. If they're not performing, get them out. Although, sometimes, if you're giving them a task that they're not able to perform, well, shame on you. But if you're giving them a task that they should be able to do, they should be able to do it with passion in the best way possible. Because we are running fast and furious all the way through 2025. So that's one. The rest, I do. It depends. I mean, we've been talking to some folks, part of doing our laundry list and how we're going to be prepared and understand the elements of a due diligence in looking forward to 2025. It seems like not all the folks want to come in and dismantle or lay off people. There may be some consolidation on back services, back office services. But most of the people in the front lines, I mean, I don't think there will be an issue. I do tell them, though, that in fact, I think it would be, or at least what I think it may be, it would be beneficial for us if 2025 comes around and we're now part of a larger agency. I think there's tons of synergies. One of the problems that we have is, how do we get noticed? I mean, we've done some amazing Shane, we have some amazing campaigns. Let's see, we created a World Guinness record for B2B. We just finished a campaign where we generated $22 million in pipeline revenue. How do I get that out there effectively to prospects? Not easy. I do think a larger agency, if we're acquired, will allow us to do that. It would relieve some of that pressure and then just concentrate and continue to grow the business. So I tell them, don't worry. If you're good, there will be a place for you. If you're slacking with or without an acquisition, you probably won't be around.
It's interesting. I see most agency owners I've seen don't have an exit plan. They're running their agency. They're thinking about potential opportunities in the future, but in fact, I've encountered this scenario a lot of times where they don't want to talk about it to their team. So why do you think differently, and how can maybe help ease the mind of another agency owner that is kind of afraid to talk about this with their team?
I think honesty is the best policy, but if I can sell them in the vision, this is where we want to go. I mean, this is why. I have a philosophy. We're gonna do it. Let's go massive, and let's go there, try to grab as much as market share as we can. And then I discovered that there are people that will share into the vision. I hope it's at least 30% of our people that they really live it, that they internalize it, that they're able to replicate it and preach about it. Then the other probably 60% is, Palmera would be just a stepping stone within their careers. If they're good, I'm gonna do my best to retain them. And right now, where I'm trying to put a lot of my effort is in the 10% that potentially may be toxic. And not because they're bad people, but if on one end I'm preaching 2025, actually that's, when we talk to our people, I tell them 2025, if we have an argument, they go like, hey, JC, but this and that, what are you doing? In fact, a lot of our decisions today, sometimes they don't make financial sense. One of our clients is UNICEF. We just did a campaign for children in Guatemala. We're not going to make any money. I mean, in fact, on strategy and creative, it's pro bono. That's it. We never make money. Sometimes on production, we make a little bit of money. We're not going to make any money. In fact, I think we may lose a little bit of money. And when our finance guy says, why, JC? I tell him 2025. So they know the code, the language. I try to make sure that it's clear within the agency. Some people will stay. Some people will leave. That's a fact. They it doesn't matter how many times I explain the benefits of an acquisition. Or if I tell them, for us to get to where we want to get, that means X amount of revenue. And I tell them, even if we don't exit, but, our agency is in the millions invoicing, I don't think it's going to be too bad for those that decide to stay. And last but not least, regardless of whether we're being acquired or not, eventually, I want to step aside. So they know that if there needs to be a succession plan, if they're behind right now as a managers or directors, and one day they say, I like to lead the agency, there is an opportunity for them to do so. And maybe they are the ones that will take it to exit, not me. And that's okay.
From a lot of my interviews with different owners, a lot of them just don't have a plan. They haven't talked to their team, or they want to keep it under wraps, or at least only talk to their leadership team, but not the rest of the team. It sounds like having that vision isn't scary. I mean, like you said, it could be, you could frame it as a stepping stone for some people, but what it does is it sounds like it creates a purpose of growth and something exciting that people can be along the ride for.
I hope so. In our process of acquisitions, I'm actually thinking probably by next year, I like to raise funds to grow through acquisitions. But in the meantime, I've explored certain opportunities. I told them, hey, let's pick a valuation model, use it for both agencies. We do an equity swap and grow because I do think stronger will be better.
How do you go about picking a valuation model?
We've looked the ones that we had a conversation initially. We looked at EBITDA. Some of the multiples that have been shared with me with some companies are 7 times EBITDA. So if your net income is about $1 million, then your agency is worth $7 million. I had another conversation that was top line driven. So if you sell 5 million, it would be a 2.5 valuation. So now you're at 12.5 million. I talked to somebody that exits successfully here in Miami. It is the name of the agency is La Comunidad, or now they call it the community. They're published actually their valuation. It was bought by Sapien, and eventually Publicis bought Sapien. But when Sapien acquired them, it was a 100 million valuation with revenues of 15 million. I think that was there was a premium there. I'm not sure the particulars of the deal, but there are certain ranges. So let's say you take a combination, I would say, between sales and net income. And if there is no, a premium on any positioning, there may be a competitive advantage. And at that point, I've told these folks, okay, your agency is worth X. Our agency is worth X plus 1 or minus 1. And we swap equity, no cash.
How do you go about swapping equity for an agency owner that's not familiar with that?
I just told you all the theory, but that's when a lot of these conversations actually die. Although more than the equity transaction in itself, I think that's probably not that difficult to explain. I think it's the fear of, am I losing control? I had a guy that he has a successful POP company in Mexico, but just Mexico. He's working with clients like Heineken. Our head of creative has a lot of experience in the beer industry. And I said, hey, imagine this for 1 minute. We take your POP expertise that you only have in Mexico. You're not going to open offices the rest in Latin America. You're certainly not going to go to the United States. Why don't you become the head of that? So we create a vertical. You become the head of everything that has to do with promotional materials. We start thinking and looking at China for outsourcing directly as opposed to going through the middle guy. And now you can take just that expertise and amplify it. But at the same time now, opens up the door for our creative team to come in and now say, hey, can we talk with Heineken about something else other than promotional materials? We have campaigns in the multicultural market, or in Mexico, or in Colombia. And in this case in particular, what killed the deal is he actually said, I don't want to have a boss. For me, it's very interesting. You know why? Because I have as many bosses, as many as directors that work directly on me. If you're leading by example, and one of these guys says, hey, I need your help, and I need it done by Friday, I need to do it by Friday. I have no choice. If you look at the round table style of management, yeah, there are my bosses too.
Did you find a way, or like looking back at it, did you waste a lot of time you didn't think was necessary, and do you have a new approach that you think you would take in the future?
I think that is just like pitching to clients. You have to go through X to close one. Currently, we're talking to a company in Spain. I mean, we got a couple clients that are Europe based. And, they're a small agency, they're 10 people. I know they don't have this cash to scale. Same conversation. And there is another one in Argentina, similar size. We're talking to them.
Now, I know we're getting close here on time, but I do want to talk about the partner or deal opportunities you're looking for. A fellow agency owner, in the U.S., or I've had a few Latin American listeners. What would you want to throw out there or give a shout out for in terms of what you could help with or the opportunities you were looking for to collaborate on with other agencies?
Earlier, we mentioned about the potential positioning as a niche. One that today may appeal to somebody that is an agency that is US based, and they have a client that most likely, if they're an international company, they're gonna do business in Latin America. The market, compared to the size of the US market, Latin America is only a portion, or including that of Europe. But depending on the agency size, it could be a healthy chunk of money. If they think there is an opportunity, something that they have never thought about it, we'll be happy to collaborate. And we do believe in healthy partnerships and win-win situations. So that could be one. The same could be said that is a market probably as large or maybe larger than Latin America is in multicultural US. Reaching the Spanish-speaking audience effectively is much more than just adapting a US-based asset. And then other than that, at some point, it's probably my next goal. We are Miami based. Miami is beautiful. I love it. Maybe in the summer, not as much. But other than that, we do. At some point, we know that we're going to need presence north of Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. At one point, I looked at Atlanta. It could be the West Coast. So if any of your listeners say, I like, I'm interested about this, equity and stuff and swapping and everything else, and there is an appetite, I'll be more than willing to look into it.
What employee size capabilities would these complementary agencies have that you would be more interested in talking to?
If I had to guess, an agency that is around 20, 25 people. If there is one vertical in which we feel that we need to improve significantly, and due to timing, we haven't done it, we're allocating resources to other verticals, is the development of technology. We're pretty good on everything that is related to conversions on the B2B space. We know there's tons of opportunity is in the VR space. So that would be one.
Okay, cool. Well, JC, we got to get things wrapping up. So what I want the listener to have is your contact info. How can they get in touch with you?
The best way is always email and later probably WhatsApp, because I'm addicted to that. but it will be jc@palmera.marketing.
PALMERA.marketing, right?
Yes.
All right, JC, thank you so much for being on the Build, Buy, Sell Agency podcast. Again, I'm your host, Shane Perkins. Thanks for listening to our Agency Leaders series on the Build, Buy, Sell Agency podcast. Please contact our guests from the links in the episode's show notes if you think there is an opportunity to work together. I recommend mentioning you found them through this podcast episode to catch their attention. Now, if you run a mid-sized agency whose bread and butter are mid-market clients, and you are interested in divestment, exploring your exit options, or driving accelerated growth via strategic collaboration with complementary agency partners, then you may be an amazing fit for our agency network, Unite Digital. Please go to unite.digital/apply to schedule a live discovery call with me so I can understand your goals for your agency and yourself, as well as share the vital benefits of operating within our network at Unite Digital to ultimately determine if you could be a fit to join and thrive within our agency network.